All right. So I remember where we guys left off in terms of the Tavusa blood. Can any of you tell me what Tavusa blood is? Arthur, what's Tavusa blood? Put a thumb down if you can't answer. Just at least pretend to be.
Hold on. Okay, Tavusa blood?
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm just trying to think now. Hold on. I don't know what it is you was talking about on WhatsApp. Oh, my mind's gone blank. Just give me a second. No, hold on. I know it. I'm trying to just get it out from my storage device. Okay. Never mind. Go.
Okay, but I actually know you know it. That's how funny it is. But I know the difference.
Yeah, I just can't think at the moment. I'm so tired.
Dave, what is Tavusa blood? Tell me if you know. Okay, Gav, do you know what Tavusa blood is?
I'll be honest, I can't remember.
All right, so I just want to do a few-minute review on what we did before, because if you can't remember, it's been awful naught. There was a whole discussion in the Mishnah as to whether dye that was used with wool was considered something substantial. In other words, a significant factor. And one of those factors was a financial implication. The other factor was the appearance. And obviously, Rava noted a contradiction because we learned in a Mishnah in Ola, chapter 3, verse 1. And we were saying that basically, if a garment was dyed with the peels of an Ola fruit, it should be certified. Meaning, for trees 3 years and under, you cannot use any of its fruit or peels or shells. Bark you can use, but everything else is prohibited. And if you use that as a dye, you have to burn it. And there was a whole discussion, do you burn it because it's of its appearance or just for its forbidden nature? And we said at the end of the day that we couldn't actually, Tosfot said we don't know if that is the exception to the rule or if it's the reason that the rules were put into place. But either way, it wasn't in and of itself a proof that could be used because of that very reason. Then we were talking about issues such as Shemitah. And does that resolve it? Because it's a similar prohibition that if it goes in a garment, you'd have to burn that garment if the dye's for Shemitah produce. Now, we were using, so Rava noted a contradiction because in that Mishnah, you have to, if a garment was dyed with the peels of Ola fruit, it has to be certified. So evidently then, appearance is considered a significant factor, which would explain the issue of if the thief would be liable for the dye and the wool combined, or if the dye itself merges into the wool and it's nothing significant. Okay, so what's the contradicting contrast? We said if a quarter log of blood, now log is a measurement, so let's call it whatever quarter of a log, whatever the milliliter is of a corpse was absorbed in the floor of a house, the utensils in that house are tameh, impure. And some say the utensils in the house are tahor, which is pure. So we're saying, why is there an apparent contradiction? So before we do that, we say, well, look, let's understand how tumah works. It's a tent or any sort of abode where a course and the object are simultaneously present under one roof. So it doesn't matter, guys, if it's an entire corpse or even certain parts of a dismembered corpse. Limb, the blood, everything there would affect everything under that ohel or that tent, and it would affect other objects. Okay, how do we know this? From Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 21, verse 11, where it says, upon the souls of any dead person, the Kohen Gadol shall not come. So the term means you can't come under the roof of a deceased. The word nefesh, soul, is understood to be referring to blood. Why? Because it's quite clear in Leviticus, Vayikra chapter 17, verse 11 and 14, which is a bit sooner than the ohel prohibition with tumah, and in Deuteronomy, Devarim chapter 12, verse 23, it's got the case that life itself is sustained by blood running through a human being. So there's a certain minimal amount of blood that's necessary to sustain human life. And there's 1/4 log of blood. Now, by forbidding a Kohen Gadol to enter under one roof with the soul, it means it's either the body of a deceased, or, in other words, a corpse or part thereof, or a certain amount of blood equaling 1 log, because that's what can sustain a life. So that would also be considered tumah. So the blood transmits corpse tumah to the utensils that are together in the same house. So the house itself becomes tameh, impure. But we wondered, is that such a thing? So we learned that it's not quite like that. Why? Because a house itself, if it's attached to land, or anything that's attached to land, unlike a tent, is not susceptible to tumah itself. That's why they use the term ohel, because when it talks about that source in Leviticus that we killed the enemies of Klal Yisrael, that there was corpse tumah, and that's why there is tumah that does occur with non-Jews as well, by the way. That was the source of it when we learned a bit in Bava Kamma. And also it's the non-attachability to the either the house itself, if it's a temporary abode like a tent, or utensils that are not attached to the land. They're susceptible to tumah, but not an actual house, guys. So we're saying, well, how can there be different versions? Either the utensil infects everything, or it doesn't infect everything. So what we are saying is that if the blood is no longer present because it has been absorbed into the floorboards, they're not going to create tumah to the utensils if you start bringing utensils in the house, providing that they're dried. And if they haven't been absorbed, it's obviously going to create tumah. So there's no contradiction. So we're talking about whether it's been liquid blood or dried and absorbed in the floor. Okay. So the Mishnah says, now, what happens if we have a case where the blood was absorbed in the garment when it was brought into the house? So we must see then that if the garment can be washed and 1/4 log of blood will come out of it, the house is impure, tameh. But if 1/4 log of blood would not come out of it, the house is pure, tahor. The only blood that can be recovered from the garment is considered to be blood. Evidently, appearance is not considered something material. So what it's actually saying there is, if the deceased died in let's say a pair of jeans, and in that pair of jeans, you take that pair of jeans out, you squeeze the blood out into a bucket, and you measure that it's 1/4 log of blood that comes out, then anything around you in that area that's caught in that abode that is movable is tumah. If anybody knows that rule, I don't know why they'd be squeezing it in a place where you've got precious items, but nonetheless, it's talking about concepts, not would be the sensible thing that a person would do in that case. But we're saying if that blood could be squeezed out, and that's 1/4 log of blood, it's tumah. If you can't squeeze out 1/4 log of blood, and that's the definition to enough blood running through the body to sustain human life, then it's not tumah, it's tahor, it's pure. So then it says, well, there's still blood in the pair of jeans. And therefore, since we don't count the blood in the pair of jeans, then therefore blood that's on a garment is not considered something significant. And there's no better dye product than blood, by the way, guys. Try getting it out. I can tell you lately, it's not easy. So we're saying then that proves that dye is not significant to clothing. Do you see the proof? You see the argument that it's trying to say, guys, that it's not a significant factor. Because before it was saying, if that's the reason that you burn a garment that's got all our dye in it, it's because it's made a difference to the appearance, then obviously the dye factor is significant. And you burn it because the significant look is something that you get deriving benefit from the color change, and you can't use all the fruit before the 3-year mark. So therefore, it's prohibited for benefit. So the first one seemed to imply that dye was significant, but this issue of blood seems that dye factor is insignificant. Why? Because if you wrought out enough blood and it wasn't a quarter of a log of blood, we don't add that to the blood that's still in a garment that can't be squeezed out, because what they are saying is what should occur if the blood was significant is the blood that you can't get out of the pair of jeans and the squeezed out blood together, if that makes a quarter of a lug of blood, then together that should make the things in the house, the utensils, tame, impure. Do you get what I'm saying? But the very fact that the blood in the jeans isn't considered to be a significant factor means that dye is not a significant factor, and therefore, in our case, the thief shouldn't be liable for it. Do you see the argument? Just say, guys, yes, no. I want to know if you understand it that far.
Yeah.
Okay. Arthur, Kevin, nod. Just nod. Okay, good, good. So we say in this particular case, that seems to resolve it. And the Gemara said it's not quite as simple as that, because Rav Kahana said that there's a special reason that there's a leniency in this case, because this quarter log of blood is what you call tavusa blood. So tavusa blood is questionable blood. In what way is it questionable? It's blood that actually flows from a wounded person as that person died. So there is an uncertainty to this case, whether the entire quarter log came out while the victim was still alive. In other words, then the blood is pure, it's tahor. Or whether it came out after his death, making the blood tamei, impure. So such blood is of a questionable nature, and that's considered impure only under rabbinic law, but not under biblical law. So it's Rabbanan and not Deraisa, because the blood itself is questionable. How do we know this? In Nida, in the 71st daf. So we're saying, in general, the appearance of that blood is something material, and therefore, if that blood clearly flowed after death, which is a biblical prohibition, you can take the blood that you could wrench out of the garment, okay, and you add that to the blood that's in the garment. How do you know? Well, I'm assuming you've got a similar pair of jeans that you can weigh before and after. It doesn't even matter. If you're almost there, the jeans are proper red instead of blue, plus you've got significant blood squeezed out, you add the two together, and that could make the utensils tumah. And therefore, blood is in very fact is, in that case, where it's non-questionable blood and it came out after that person's death, then that would be equated to a fact where the appearance is something material and something significant, because it's added to the squeezed out blood, and therefore that would make the contents in the house tumah. You get that?
Yeah.
It's only because it's tavusa blood that it's rabbinic, and therefore we're more lenient. But that's not a proof that the appearance of blood on the garment is something insignificant. And because that was brought as a primary factor, we're not sure that it's something totally significant, because if it was something significant under all circumstances, it would be not allowed even as a rabbinic leniency. So that's the problem we're stuck with. Otherwise, it kind of would have resolved the issue, and they would have used that as the original source without appealing to the Kevin, appealing to all appeals. You see? Yeah, I did that just for you. Give Kevin a kick, because he's the king of puns. Okay. So, all right. So that I believe Arthur actually knew what was going on. That's why I asked him. It's just he couldn't think of it at this time, but he has gone through.
I actually did. I remember, because I was actually, funny enough, I was eating a fruit off the tree downstairs, which was And I just remember that, but he did all the blood, and I was a bit confused. And only once I said, "Oh yeah, the thing that the trees that are 3 years old with the hair." That's why we hold this. So I was listening to that part. It all came back as soon as I realized it was the fruit of the tree. But when you said all the blood, it just confused me
Exactly. So
because of the word blood.
I am going to go to a before Kevin gets on the bus as a matter of interest. I just wanted to ask Kevin, maybe he wants to speak to us for a few minutes before I add the other parts of the Gemara.
Okay.
Add a minute or two. Talk to us.
Okay. So I want to just say something about not jumping to conclusions and judging. So I arrived this afternoon because I went to Shiva for my cousin's husband and father, and the bus took about 20 minutes. And I thought, geez, it's being very frustrated. And I thought to myself, what's going on here? You know, it's unacceptable. Meanwhile, there was a terrorist attack today. That's right. So shouldn't be so. One shouldn't jump to conclusions and judge and get upset about things. So just jumping, it's something we all need to work on, and we've probably failed more than we passed this type of thing. So not to jump to conclusions about anything, basically. I mean, it's easier said than done. So, and to judge favorably. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, Kevin, jumping to conclusions and flying off the handle are my two favorite exercises. Otherwise, I wouldn't do any cardio.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's a good point, actually, that we need to just get a full perspective of the situation. All right, guys, we're going to hit another part of the Mishnah. Now, guys, Rava also notes another contradiction with respect to the laws of Shemitah and proceeds to resolve it. Remember, we brought the Ola fruit peel about what was prohibited, and we did the same thing with respect to the laws of Shemitah, about how you have to burn an item that you die with it in certain cases, and there you can't get benefit, so therefore dying is something significant. And we said, well, it wasn't so easy and clear cut, and Rava's going to bring a particular contradiction to prove it. Now, the contradiction he brings is in the Mishnah in Shavuos chapter 7, verse 1. And basically, it says, from among the dyes, aftergrowth of safflower and woad, okay, are subject to Shemitah sanctity, and the money paid for them is subject to Shemitah sanctity. They are subject to the requirement of bi'ur, of removal, and the money paid for them is subject to the requirement of removal. So evidently wood is subject to Shemitah sanctity. Okay, so I'm going to just unpack it piece by piece. So basically, in the beginning of the Mishnah, there's a major rule that was stated concerning Shemitah. Whatever is human food, animal food, or dye stuff, which does not endure in the ground, is subject to Shemitah sanctity. Why? Because it's by human planting that it has been caused, and due to the fact that it needs human interference, we have to give the ground a rest, and therefore it's in that particular case that that it falls part of Shemitah sanctity. Something that is perennial and lasts irrespective of whether we plant it is not subject to it, or something that grows naturally that is perennial. So in other words, if it requires your intervention every year in order to plant it, then on the Jubilee year, the Yovel year, as well as the seventh year, the Shemitah year, you have to give it a break, and you can't toil the soil. So therefore, without that human intervention, it's going to wither and die. But if you can plant it in year 5, and from then on it just keeps growing and growing and growing, then it's not by your intervention that it is getting its nutrients, nor is it continuing to grow, such as grains, which require ploughing, harvesting, preparation, grinding, etc. And therefore, things that require human intervention get the sanctity of Shemitah. Now, if you pay money for it or sell it, then that Shemitah sanctity actually transfers to the money that you've paid for it. And so too, what you buy with that money becomes Shemitah sanctity, because you're actually perpetuating that benefit at which you were not required to benefit from. So there's a certain period at which you have to get rid of it, the Biur period. Well, there's a discussion with the Russians and the Rambam, who said that it needs to, as far as I know, be burnt, and others say it suffices just to get rid of it. Or to not necessarily burn, destroyed, but others say you can just get rid of its use. But the subject of this requirement of biur, which is removal, and the money paid for it is subject also to that requirement of biur. So the Mishnah now, guys, is going to proceed to list a variety of examples of the three categories mentioned. Okay, so Gavin, what are those categories? Do you know? I'll repeat it because it's late. Human food, animal food, or dye stuff. Those are the things which do not.
Human food, animal food. What is the last one? I can't actually hear the last one. Say it again.
Things that you use for dyeing. In other words, not consumption.
Right.
Food. Yeah, dye. So that which does not endure in the ground is subject to the sanctity of Shemitah. So if you're using that as a byproduct for dyeing fabrics, animal food or human food, those are your prohibited ones. Okay. Now, because our Gemara, when we learned it, only lists the clause of the Mishnah which gives examples of dye stuffs that don't endure in the ground, and therefore are subject to both Shemitah sanctity and biur removal. Okay, and what were those? It says from among the dyes, you've got aftergrowth and safflower and woad. Okay, aftergrowth of safflower and woad. So safflower and woad are your things. The aftergrowth is just what grows afterwards. It's pretty straightforward. So the Mishnah basically refers to it as aftergrowth because it's prohibited to plant in Shemitah. So if you've got safflower and woad that appear in the fields during this year, the Shemitah year, they perforce are aftergrowths of the previous year's plants, right? Because they grew from seeds that were dropped the previous year. Now, as far as that's concerned, you've got to learn if you can use it or if you can't. So if they're subject to Shemitah sanctity and the money paid for them is subject to Shemitah sanctity, they are subject to the requirement of biur removal, and the money paid for them is subject to the requirement of that removal. And what does that mean? Is I just want to break this up in a simple way. Let me just think of a simple way. Okay, so guys, they're going to be consumed in accord with the laws of Shemitah. So you, as Rashi said, not allowed to do business with them. Business with them means, it's obviously commercial, but it means more than that. It's to perpetuate their benefit. Because what does business do? You have a product and you sell it in order to make money. Then you use that money, and that money uses to buy other things. So you're perpetuating the eternal nature of the product by dealing with it in a commercial way. And when you dye a product, it's known as doing business with it because the dye is permanent. Just like doing business with the produce and selling it and keeping the money and buying other things creates a sort of permanence. Why? If you sell a plant, you use that money and you buy a picture frame, then the benefits there become permanent, just like dyeing a garment has a certain degree of permanence. Now, the problem with that is you have to, at a certain point, get rid of it. You can use it for a certain period of time. We'll discuss what that is. But but you've got to get rid of it by the time of biur, that removal time. So you can't use it for dyeing, because when they use it as a form of business rather than consumption, it lasts beyond the time of biur. That's the only definition, okay? So the permission basically to benefit from Shemitah produce in non-food ways has to conform to the rules laid down for eating. So non-food benefits must also cease at the time of removal, because there's certain things that you can eat and certain things that you can't, but you've still got a removal period. Okay. So if you sell Shemitah produce, the produce of the sale, money, or anything brought with those proceeds attain Shemitah sanctity, and you have to consume that, and that can't be used for the business of dyeing. Why? Because in Gemara Sotah 40 it says there's a permanence to it, and that you can use the dye plants for fueling a fire only until the time of removal. Why? So what's this got to do with fire? Because it says evidently wood is subject to Shemitah sanctity. So what does it mean? Is that basically I'm competing with the dog. It's quite funny, a little humiliating, but kind of funny. Let me just see how long we've got, guys. Give me 1 second. I'm competing with the poodle. It's bizarre. Just give me a sec. So, okay, so let me just, I'm trying to unpack this in a simple way. So, if you look at Vayikra chapter 25, verse 6 and 7, it says, the Shabbat produce of the land shall be yours to eat, and for your animals and for the beasts that are in your land. And it says, as long as the type of vegetation, this is in Pesachim, still available in the fields for animals to eat, you can keep the picked fruit of that species in your house to feed your animals or yourself. If a species of plant isn't available in the fields because the animals ate them, you've got to remove that was set aside for your animal or yourself in the house. So that is two sort of prohibitions. Either it dies naturally, in other words, it's out of season and the plant dies, or the animals have consumed it. Either way, if it's no longer available in the fields for picking, then you have retained the benefit, and then you've got to get rid of it at that certain point. Okay? Now, although they have got Shemitah sanctity, they're still subject to removal. It doesn't mean you can't use them, but they have a limited amount of time. And they remain available to animals in the field throughout the winter. In other words, anything that's got Shemitah sanctity but can last during the winter period and are available through animals, you don't have to remove. But we're going to discuss what this removal actually is. Okay? But bearing in mind that there are 4 factors to consider here. Number 1, the fact is we're going to learn about intent. What do you intend to use an item for? And that will determine Shemitah sanctity, because it's going to be going through issues of basically consumption after benefit, consumption during benefit. And your intent is, guys, I've got this yapping dog, this poodle. I'm trying to heed Kevin's words of patience. I just want to snap the neck of this poodle, but my better half doesn't. And it's just barking.
Go ahead, we don't mind waiting. Go ahead, we don't mind waiting.
You wouldn't say that if, what was your poodle's name, Gav?
No, he's still around. He's going strong, but he's getting old. Shame. Gucci.
Gucci. Yeah, I like Gucci. I've never heard of Gucci.
Yeah, I think he's only got a few years left at best.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
lovely dog.
no, he's a lovely dog. All right. All right, so guys, I'm actually battling with concentration with this dog, barking and yapping and barking and yapping. Can we do the rest tomorrow? I'm sure you guys are okay with that. Can't compete with this dog continually yapping.
I'm fine.
I'm
Yeah,
fine with that, Damon.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not
And,
to that.
That's
and,
what class
and
we
by the
did,
way, we all got it a few years at best, not just the dog.
God
Yeah,
forbid,
yeah,
to
yeah.
120 guys with good strength.
120. Yeah.
Fine.
Amen.
In
Cheers. Thanks
health.
for reminding.
In
Thanks for
health, not
reminding us,
health.
Arthur.
Your diction, Arthur. Health, in health, not in health. You've got to have good brocha.